Hey everybody, Mark Edward Lewis here from cinemasound.com. Today we're going to talk about a question that we get from time to time about what audio interface should we use. Let's roll. Now let me give you some full disclosure. I've been using Mark of the Unicorn interfaces since like the beginning. And by beginning I mean early 90s, even late 80s. I think that some other interfaces are great, but my massive experience and great response from CinemaSound members that we've sent to these interfaces is extreme, and I can't recommend another audio interface than the ones that I'm about to recommend. Now, first of all, before I say this, let me cover Pro Tools. If you're a Pro Tools user, hey, look, you got to have a Pro Tools audio interface. No way around it. They've built it in so that you can't use another interface with any kind of HD system. Now, of course, you can use, something else if you want to fool around with host-based Pro Tools. But if you're using HDX and dedicated hardware acceleration, you are using Pro Tools audio interfaces. And look, in my humble opinion, Pro Tools audio interfaces are way overpriced, don't sound anywhere near as good as some of the way lesser priced audio interfaces that are out there. They're a huge waste of money and a really, really good way to suck money out of the users, which of course is no way to have a business. Like Apple, Avid doesn't care about you, doesn't care about me, doesn't care about anything but getting your money. And how do we know this? Well, because, oh boy, I'm going on a rant, but hold on a second. Because every time they have an upgrade, every time they say, oh, well, you got to buy the hardware to use it, you buy the hardware, and then they do an upgrade, and they're like, oh, well, none of that hardware works anymore. You got to buy the hardware again. And in between these, they'll say, oh, listen, you don't need any hardware to use Pro Tools. And then you buy Pro Tools, and then you have a bunch of stuff on it, and then you're like, and then the next version, like, oh, well, this doesn't work anymore. Now you have to have hardware to the tune of 10 grand or 5 grand or whatever it is. So be wary of Avid. Boo hiss on Avid. So, and Pro Tools. I mean, we got to use it if you're in the Hollywood level so far, but I despise that company. So that said, what kind of audio interfaces do I recommend? Again, Mark of the Unicorn. Mark of the Unicorn has, Roland also has some good audio interfaces that are of like functionality and value for a reasonable price. But Mark of the Unicorn, it has regularly updated support and drivers and firmware. I've been using them for, how many years is this now? 30, 35 years? A long time. And the one I'm using now is the 1248, which is kind of a flagship for it as of the moment. But I've been recommending to CinemaSound members any of the ultralite interfaces, the Mark III even, which is ancient, but works great, especially if you're doing 5.1. And we all should be prepped and able to do 5.1. Because you never know when you're going to need it. And I always recommend that you do your big mixes in 5.1, even if you're not sure it's going to go into 5.1. It just helps everything if you've thought about center and LFE and surrounds and everything like that. Easy to down mix, really hard to up mix. So you want to have an audio interface that has 8 independent outs to cover you out to 7.1 if you need it. The Ultralite Mark III, and of course the AVP Ultralite Mark IV, which is awesome, does all of that. They all have fiber in and out. They all can do 192 kilohertz recording and playback if you want it, which is it could be really, really important. They're also quiet, and the preamps in them are kind of flat, which is what you want. You don't want hyped up preamps or warm or dark or whatever, any of this digital. You just want something that's nice and quiet and flat. Most Mark of the Unicorn interfaces can also be operated without the computer present, so you can use them as a mixer. And of course, you can daisy chain an awful lot of them together to get a ridiculous amount of I/O in and out of your computer. And now with the AVP line of products, you can operate all of them from a simple web browser, from your iPad or your iPhone or anything that can connect to them via Ethernet or USB. Now, let me just make sure you get this straight. Most audio interfaces, even if they do 192 kilohertz, 24-bit, and they have 8 channels of input and output, don't need anything more than a USB 2 connection. What? I know, it's a little weird. You're like, well, how does that even work? How does it get the data back and forth fast enough? Well, as it turns out, audio data at 24-bit isn't that big of a bandwidth thing. And 8 channels can easily be done along with metadata across a USB 2 connection. So, you don't need fiber or Ethernet or whatever. So don't be fooled. We're like, oh, what kind of connection do I need to have? Not much. And most of these interfaces have MIDI built in, and I mean like the old 5-pin MIDI connections, not just, I run my keyboard via USB. So that gives you more functionality, like the ultralites do. Now, my 1248 doesn't have any MIDI connectivity, but my MIDI devices are all USB, and that's fine. So are there other audio interfaces that are out there that have more bells and whistles? Totally. But for value, under $500 to get a Mark III ultralite or a Mark IV ultralite even, that's incredible. And of course, they work with everything. They work with Pro Tools, the HD, not the HD, the non-HD based thing. And let me tell you a little secret. Now, we have an article about this on Cinema Sound, how you can get away with using Pro Tools with the cheapest audio interface possible from Avid, please, and using a Mark of the Unicorn, really nice sounding audio interface and all their beautiful preamps and all that stuff. How do we do it? Well, go read the article for sure to get the full download, no pun intended. But basically this, buy some cheap Avid connectivity interface, $200 or $300 that has fiber ADAT connection in and out. And then Pro Tools gets happy because it sees an audio interface that it wants to use, but little does it know that you're not using any of the analog parts of that dumb interface. It's just all you're doing is having that on there to keep Pro Tools happy. And then you're going fiber, bit for bit, out of the audio interface into your Mark of the Unicorn interface, which could easily be the Mark III or the Mark IV ultralite or the 1248, any of those that have fiber, almost all of them do. And then from there, you go analog out, sounding so much better. And of course, when you need to do recordings, the same. You're going into the Mark of the Unicorn interface and then fiber into the Pro Tools interface. And it doesn't mess with the fiber sound or the digital bits once it gets fiber at all. So hopefully that's helpful. And hopefully this whole video has been helpful to get you a little understanding of what maybe you want to use in terms of your audio interface. Please comment here as to what your experiences are with your audio interfaces or what you'd like, and we'll answer those questions as best as we can. Definitely subscribe to us here and come visit us at cinemasound.com, where we have hundreds of articles, including the articles and videos that I mentioned earlier, to give you that unfair competitive advantage in the independent and Hollywood marketplace for immersion and sound and maximizing the impact that you have on your audiences. Hopefully we'll see you at cinemasound.com, and until then, we'll see you in the studio.
Even if it's where you're stuck.